Well, welcome to another episode of Fair Folk at Work. My guest today has traveled the globe with the stories and skills he's learned at the Renaissance Fair. And indeed, he is promoting a new event where he incorporates both Dungeons and Dragons and Shakespeare. My guest, of course, is my good friend, Shelby Bond. Shelby, welcome.
Dan, thanks for having me.
Before we get to you traveling the globe, spreading the gospel of fair, we'll start with the traditional fair folk at work first question, which is, who was the person who said to you there was this thing called fair, and what did they say to get you out there?
I grew up in West Texas, Midland, which is George Bush's hometown. We didn't have a prom. We had a dance called Katoika, which is short for the Cattle, Oil, and Cotton Dance. So there was no Ren Fair, no cosplay, there was no Comic Con, nothing like that out there where I'm from. And I came out to LA, and right when I got out here, I was in Arcadia, and there was some kind of costumed event going on, and my friend and I were walking through the park, and I saw people hitting each other with swords dressed in armor. And then I saw this kid that I found out later it was for Make-A-Wish Foundation, and he had wished to be king for a day. And all the people were offering him tapestries they'd made, and they were fighting in his honor. And I was just like, what is this? This is the best, like to see like this kind of energy in the air. And I asked my friend, and he said, oh, this is SCA, stands for Society for Creative Anachronism. And if you like this, you must love the Ren Fair. And I was like, what's the Ren Fair? This was 30 years ago. And that very next year, we went out for my first time out to Devore and went to the Southern California Renaissance Pleasure Fair. And I'm still there. And I'm so lucky that my friend led me to this place because it changed the course of my entire life.
Do you remember any of the sensations of when you first got out to Devore?
Honestly, that first day, the sensation I remember most was walking across a rope and trying to kiss a girl. This was back when you could really literally walk across a rope, and they had a few, lovely people out on the other side. And I spent all of my money all day long trying to get out to kiss this girl. And yeah, it was money well spent. Let me say that because I remember the magic in the air.
How did you make the transition from besotted attendee and customer to person who worked there?
As I think a lot of people come out to Los Angeles, actors from all over the world, performers from all over the world come out here because they want to make it in film and TV. And I think what happens with a lot of actors is they come out here to back in their hometown, they've been doing theater, all the time, constantly. And they come out here and they can't do theater because that has to be in the evening because they have to have their days free for auditions. And at night, they have to have a job, like waiting tables or something like that, which means after a year or two or five, they realize, I haven't been doing any acting. I came out here to act. I used to act all the time back in my hometown. And now here, I'm not doing any acting. I'm just waiting around for the chance to hopefully act. And so when I found the Ren Fair, that first year, I realized that there were stage shows and that it was on the weekends. I could still work in the evenings, still have days free for auditions, and be out there on the weekends. And so that very next year, I went from having just probably the worst costume in the world, which was basically a martial arts gi or something that I wore that first year, to auditioning out for the Pattersons. Gosh, the audition process. I don't know if you were there for it. Back in the day, we were out at the San Bernardino University. They had auditions where all the guild masters would sit in the room. And it was like being rushed for fraternities because afterwards, if they liked you, they'd come down and like tell you why you should be in their guild. It felt great because you got to choose which house you were going to belong to. It was like Harry Potter, but all the houses are running down saying, you should be Gryffindor and here's why. And the criers telling me, oh, we have the most fun, and the court saying we have the best costumes and that we do the best historical research. And God, I just remember being like, this is exactly where I should be.
And it was a nice change of pace from auditioning and hearing variations on no to people actually wanting you to play with them.
Yeah. I had a skill set and I still do for the theater more than I do film and TV. And I think a lot of people don't talk about that when they come out here. If you're doing theater so much and you're trying to do film and TV, there's an energy to live performance. And what you were saying before about walking up to people on the streets and interacting with them in a experiential type way, that nothing comes close to that. And my growing up doing theater sports, a lot of interactive theater, it was just perfect for Ren Fair. And I'm so #blessed.
What was your, before you entered Fair, your theatrical skill set, and how had you acquired it?
My mom is a playwright. And so from the time I could walk, probably, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I remember being on stage when I was about 6 years old on. So I've been in the theater all my life on stage, and there's nowhere in the world that I'm more at home than on stage.
Can I interrupt for a sec?
Yes, please do.
Has your mom ever written a play for you or with you?
Well, yes, yeah. She's written a lot of plays. If you want to look her up, her name is Linda Thorson Bond, and she has written plays off Broadway and produced all over. And a lot of her plays are very female centric, which is fantastic. You have a lot of strong women. One of them is called Five Ex-Wives in ICU, because it's about all my father's 5 wives in the emergency room when he was passing away, and how they could all love the same man. He was married 6 times to 5 women. And a lot of my mom's shows I don't get to be in, but some of them I have. She's married me off twice now in plays, which hasn't happened in real life, but I have a lot of wedding photos, historic ones from me getting married in her plays. She writes historic and interactive plays a lot, which is very much like Ren Fair in that people have their characters, and people that come as the show interact with these live historical kind of like living history characters. So I was custom made for Ren Fair.
So when you said, I'm going to Los Angeles for a career in the arts, that was like, oh, okay, good luck.
No, I was very supported, and I learned two important things from my mother in particular. One is stagecraft and understanding, how to interact with the audience and things like that. And two is how to be poor. I learned not that we were poor, but just she never had a regular income. It's like artists. You get some money, then you have none, then you get some money, and I was already used to that roller coaster of insecurity.
So were you like always in the school play? And
I would be willing to bet, in fact, a lot of people I've talked to have said this, that Ren Fair was the first time they felt really free to be themselves, and that they found out there a place where they felt accepted if they didn't normal world, things like that, And for me, I think this happens with a lot of people in small towns. They feel stifled. They feel maybe even persecuted for being different, kind of hiding their freak flag, not letting it fly. And growing up in where I did in Texas, school was where I'm from is where the movie and TV show and stuff, Friday Night Lights, is about. So football was king. The school was all about sports. I felt very uncomfortable and never enjoyed it. And then when I was young, before probably middle school, I found the community theater. And the theater for me was the first time I found a place that was safe and beautiful and free for me. And so I never did school plays, but I did all the theater at the community theater. And it was one of the top 3 community theaters in America. They had $1 million budgets for plays because of all the oil money in Texas. And I'm so glad that there were people that saw the arts worthwhile enough to put money into that community theater. And in the youth theater group I was in, called the Pickwick Players, that place was a fortress of solitude and growth for me. So I was doing Shakespeare in 7th grade. All the schools in my whole hometown were bussed in to watch us do Shakespeare. So I was finding tremendous outlets. And that community theater, when I came out here, I didn't find anything like that until I found Ren Fair.
Do you remember the first time you went on stage and you looked out and you go, okay, this is where I'm going to be for the rest of my life? And what role was that, or what play?
I remember the first time I killed on stage was in Damn Yankees, and I couldn't get the choreography down, so I was always a little bit off. And so the director, smart director, saw our talents or lack thereof and utilized that. So he said, great, let's go ahead and push you being one step off on everything. And he went with it, and I was able to just kind of mess up on purpose now. And I realized that there was such It wasn't just being on stage. It wasn't finding a character. It was like a direct way I did something and I heard the audience laughing about it. I just remember that, having 500 people laugh.
It sounds like a great director, actually, not to throw their hands up and throw a temper tantrum, but say,
Right. Yeah. And instead of forcing it, like me trying to be funny, I was actually trying to get the steps, which makes it much funnier.
right.
So, finding something organic. I love a performance when you can tell it's grounded and somebody isn't trying to, trying to make people laugh or something, but
So
letting them laugh with you.
getting back to being swarmed at the Patterson's audition by the different guild masters, what do you remember about different pitches and what was the winning pitch that caught your eye?
I love the pitches. I love the Celts. Literally, he just stood up and said, "I'm looking for guys with pickup trucks and chainsaws." That was like the whole pitch. But happened, Leslie Patterson swooped down, grabbed the who she thought were the probably 10 best improvisers, and said, "I'm putting together a new troupe," and didn't let any of the other guilds grab us. So we were the very first Lord Mayor's players, and we did something like 8 shows a day, and we were directed by her. And Southern Ren Fair and Northern are so different from the other fairs in America. The guilds are like families, and you're cooking for each other and eating together, and you're creating a village as opposed to just stage. I'm on stage. So being a performer at fair, it might mean you're just out there, but it might mean you're a performer playing a performer. I was an actor being an actor, as opposed to an actor being a knight. So I immediately got to be on stage as a performer out at Ren Fair.
What was your street character?
My first character was Oliver Closeoff. So yeah, I was Oliver Closeoff my first year, and I remember in that troupe, one of the guys, his name was Avery Pratt. Avery Pratt, you might know him, the inventor of that famous stage fall, the Avery Fall. He ended up being an executive producer on Frasier. He started writing for Frasier on that next year. People went off to be professors in theater, and then a couple of them ended up joining up and helping form the None Such Players with Kevin Patterson. So that troupe had a lot of great talent in it, and me.
One of the things I'd like to do is maybe take you through in improv or two as we do a conversation. Would you like to do that?
Sure.
Okay.
Yes. And
You're at fair. You're your character, and my clothes fall off, or whatever it was.
Oliver Closeoff.
Oh, all of our clothes off. Yeah, okay.
Your clothes fall off.
I should have probably written that down. Uh, so at
Funny.
any rate, it's 10:30 in the morning. You're at the back of the fair. People are beginning to filter in, but it's basically you're just on the street, and ahead of you, you see a family walking to you, mom and dad and 2 kids. Mom is wearing a granny dress, and she has like an old garland. Dad is just has a camera and is like taking pictures of things. The girl looks about 12 years old. She has a newly purchased garland on her head, and she has a newly purchased wooden sword in her hand. Her little brother, maybe 18 months younger, like a year and a half, he has a Robin Hood cap, and he's carrying a wooden sword. And the dad has a Robin Hood hat as well. They see you, and obviously they're taking you in. And what do you do?
My good gentles, good cousins, wondrous well that you have approached this way. I would say I see warriors amongst you. You too, the small ones. I see you have, yes, swords in your hands.
The
Trust
little
you know how to.
boy thrusts out his sword and sort of waves it at you.
Oh, I'm a friend. I'm a friend. In fact, I come from the Queen. She's looking for new knights of the realm, and the two of you, in fact, the man as well in the hat. Yes, all of you should be knights of the realm. You must go to the Queen and give her this message. Tell her you are there to shield her and protect her from the dangerous works of William Shakespeare.
The little girl giggles and clutches her mom's leg.
Oh, good. Now, before you go, would you learn a reverence, a proper bow? May I teach you a proper bow to show to the queen?
She just big eyes, nods her head yes.
Wondrous well. Left foot forward, right foot back. Your feet are in an L shaped. Good. Now, bend at the waist. Good. Yes, perfect. Keep your sword down or the queen may think you're dangerous. I know you're dangerous, but not to the queen. And we reverence. Hat off, sir. Goodness gracious. Have you no decorum? Wondrous well. Go to the queen. Tell her you're here to protect the realm. You are new knights. Well,
The
at
dad
least
says,
warriors.
can they take a picture with you?
Oh, certainly. Paint a quick portrait of me with the two warriors. Strike your most fierce pose.
Click. And he says, thank you very much and have a nice day.
Gramercy, good gentles. Watch out for Shakespeare. His work is dangerous.
Perfect. Well done. Well, I see you haven't forgotten.
Well, that I love going up to people. I've been doing stage shows for a long time out at fair.
Right.
And so I don't do as much street interaction, but I always tell classes when I'm teaching improv or acting out there that the street theater is the heart of the Ren Fair. People will remember that longer than anything else they saw out there. If somebody comes up and directly interacts with them.
Now, we sort of hinted at this, and I'm going to make a statement and agree or disagree, and then say which either you prefer. So it's a multi-part question.
Okay.
There's a difference you get as a performer between a one-on-one improv in the street versus standing on the stage and getting a response from 600 people. Do you
Oh.
find that to be true? And if so, which performance thrill do you prefer?
I absolutely agree that they're very different. And I think if you're going to make this binary, there are two kinds of actors in the world, two kinds of performers. There's the kind that really prepare and they create a character and they work very hard on this character and they understand what this actor would say. They're great working a script because they can really break down the beats and all that. And then there are actors that work off more of an immediate energy and electricity and don't do the work like Meryl Streep might. But if you put the second kind of actor on stage in front of 1,000 people with nothing to say, they would be like, everybody, and they'd start having fun. Whereas if you put the other actor on there with nothing prepared at all and no idea what character they're supposed to be or what script they're supposed to be doing, they would be very overwhelmed. I definitely lean more toward kind of an organic chemistry of theater. And that's why I love that first kind where you don't know what's going to happen. You don't know there's chaos involved, and I love chaos. I've worked with other actors that want to know exactly what's going to happen. And I always say, I don't know what's going to happen. They're like, what do you mean you don't? I'm like, I don't know. We have to roll with it. And they're just like, that stresses me out. And to me, it stresses me out not to acknowledge moments as they're happening. So my point of this whole story is I came out of that one-on-one interaction and I still do that on stage in front of a lot of people. I think I have the same energy, and I hope at least aspire to have the same energy in front of one people as I do 600, meaning I'm still really present. I'm not just doing my thing. And that's the magic of the Ren Fair is people aren't just spectators. They're like stepped into our world. So if we're not just performing for them, but we're performing with them and bringing them along with us. So I think for me, it's the same in a way, even though they're very different. Does that make any sense?
It makes perfect sense to me.
Okay.
But let me try to ask that question in a different way.
Okay.
At the fair, there's a tradition of working with masks, and that you can be Bob the Butcher playing Pantalone or something. And at the same time, you have somebody playing just the Queen. Do you see that distinction playing out at fair?
Yes, I understand. A lot of people don't want to kind of obfuscate them from the audience with all these character stuff. I think it can be incredible when people are able to capture a character. I mean, let's just talk about the Queen for a second. Man, when the Queen when she fully understands status and the use of very minimal effort to command attention, and when she points and moves her hand across the stage and people bow, like you could just feel it. Some of the queens, man, Athene, some of the queens we've had have just been so brilliant at capturing that energy. When they're going to the fair, you can see even little kids are kind of afraid to make eye contact. Not that they're scared of them, just that they feel the power of the queen. And everyone's working together to help create that. All the knights around them carrying them and all the creating this energy. And that's amazing. And it's all because we've all agreed upon that energy on her. I think my personal energy is that I am very, very approachable and very friendly. And I think it's interesting to understand your brand. I've got this interesting story. I went and did this thing years ago called the Sam Christensen process or something like that. And what you did is you would go, there was a sheet of adjectives, like 200 of them. Everything from grumpy, paternal, jealous, chill, whatever, hundreds of them. And you would go in twos, like you and I would go, and you would stand somewhere and I'd walk up to people and I'd say, you see my friend over there? We're doing this acting exercise. Would you do me a favor? Just looking at him, would you just check any of these things that you think kind of, connect with whatever, just first thing comes to your mind. If you think he looks moody. And so we would do hundreds of these pages and then we'd go through and we'd find what we got the same. Because what was interesting is, and what I didn't expect was, definitively, you would get the same ones again and again and again and again. Even no matter how you tried to look, no matter how you dressed, no matter what you did, you would get the same adjectives again and again and again. Like me, I got 20 out of 20 pleasant. And I was like, pleasant? That's the most boring adjective, what I mean? Pleasant. But my teacher said, well, look, we're trying to figure out how people see you so you can help put that forward more. So he said pleasant. Well, Jimmy Stewart made a career out of being pleasant. You know what I mean? Like, that's not a bad adjective. You just have to figure out how to capture that. And so if I know that, if I know how people and audiences connect to me, I can connect to them. I'm already there, knowing what they're seeing and then building characters off that. Which, again, why is it that someone comes out and you say, that's the queen? It's because 20 times out of 20, they're getting that one checked that says powerful or authoritative. And they might be getting that even when they're not trying to be the queen. Maybe that's just kind of their energy.
Fair is outdoors. What lessons have you learned actually out in the environment, outdoors, of acting in the fair, and how to keep an audience or how to attract an audience?
I think over many years of doing it, you become very empathetic and intuitive as to whether or not people want to play. A lot of people come out to the Ren Fair to really play, and you can tell almost like an animal sense whether or not someone is afraid and how to be easy on them, but they still want to play. And I bring a lot of people up on the stage now. And no, I can tell the people that want to play, but they're afraid, the people who want to play and they're going to take over the whole show, or people who want to be left alone. And you have to kind of be good at reading that. I don't think any of us are immediately, but after years of doing this, you can really gauge the way people want to be a part of what we're doing out there. And it helps to always remember your first time out at the fair, whether it was having some kid come up and tell you that they would like you to save them from a dragon, or whether it was walking across the rope trying to kiss a girl, whatever it was, that magic you felt out at the fair that made that place extraordinary and made you want to play. And I hope that I can stay conscious to that memory of why I think the fair is magic and why it's not just a place where people come to be spectators. They are not audience, they are a part of the show. I feel very strongly about that because I see some fairs talk about the patrons as if they are waiting in the lobby out front and then they're coming in just to watch the show. And a lot of us come from a world where we were there to bring them into our world and not just entertain them.
It sounds like in your stage shows, you're trying to, in some ways, recreate that bond with your audience where there's not a fourth wall. What other sort of fair street techniques do you try to incorporate into your stage work?
There are a lot of people that would say that I'm crazy, or they can't believe that I bring so many people onto stage because it brings a wild card into the show. It means that it might be good or might be bad based off of what they do. And I don't mind. I want that chaos. I mean, I love traditional theater. I think fourth wall theater can be great, but out at the Ren Fair, so many people are coming to because they want to play. That's, you see them dress up. They want to be a part of it. There's a great quote by Lynn Gardner of The Guardian. She says, "We are no longer content to sit quietly in our seats when we can storm the stages." And that sentiment is very illustrative of the move toward interactive theater, immersive theater, participatory theater, but we were doing it 60 years ago or whatever. I've learned on the streets or on the stage how to give them agency and how to let them play. But in my shows, the main skill that I've learned to keep a show together is how to give them plenty of sandbox to play in, but it's still my sandbox, and I, on stage at least, to where I can still keep control and try to make a story out of it.
That is sort of baked into the fair. I did an interview with Judy Corey, who was hired by Phyllis at the first Renaissance Fair. She did a Lady Godiva show, and she was the only person on stage, and she drew up. Everybody else was an audience member. When Phyllis and Judy started doing, and all the other people, it was like the early 60s, and there was the start of a new theater movement. And some of the tenets were everybody can act and no one could fail. And that was the basic premise of the people who started the Renaissance Fair. And also that it was meant to be a day of joy. The Queen is coming, and it's sort of one of the legacies of the Patterson. Any other street techniques you found useful in other contexts at the fair?
Yeah, for years I taught the improv classes out at Fair, and there's a book we used to teach stuff from. Gary Izzo. His book was called The Art of Play, and he talks about how the easier you can make it for the audience to interact with you, the better. Meaning, like, let's say I'm in the streets and I'm doing this. They don't really know what I'm doing, but if all of a sudden I'm holding a skull and I'm going, then people are walking by, they're like, "Hey, Hamlet, hey, it's York. Did you know him?" All of a sudden, just with that one prop, you've made it easy for people to play with you because they know what to do, as opposed to you just standing there. I mean, some people might walk up and say, "Who are you?" But most people are just going to go, "That's a guy standing there." But if I'm standing there with 5 chastity belts, people know that I'm a chastity belt seller, and they can immediately interact with that because they know they can play with you. And that's one of the things I always tell people. I say, if you're going to have lunch or just sit down and take a nap, don't do it backstage. Do it on the street. Live out there. And if you're going to walk from stage to stage, don't just walk there. Do it with some purpose so that all the time you're out on the street, you're giving people a chance to play with you. I can admit something to you.
Go ahead.
I will admit something. For many years, I was embarrassed to be out at the Ren Fair. And I feel so bad saying that now. Not that I didn't enjoy being there. I enjoyed being there very much. But I would come back into LA, into Hollywood, and go on auditions. And the Ren Fair had a reputation of being filled with kind of nerdy deviants or whatever, hippies and all that kind of stuff. So it wasn't something I bragged about. If I'd go to an audition, even if I'd just done shows that weekend for thousands of people, I'd go into an audition for a Geico commercial or something, and all of a sudden I felt small again, and I felt like no matter how successful I got in the Ren Fair, that I would ever get any leverage out of it for a film and TV career in LA. I would keep it to myself as if it was something to be embarrassed about. And that makes me sad looking back, because the fair has given me so much, and I love what we do, and I'm proud of what we do now, and I realize what a community it provides people, what an outlet, what a safe space, what an opportunity to perform that it gives people like me, actors that were looking for a place for audience, and all of a sudden I perform for hundreds of thousands of people all over the world. I'm so lucky, and looking back, I feel embarrassed that I felt that way.
What was the process you went from being embarrassed to saying, I'm going to go outside the fair and take those skills and apply them elsewhere?
I was really lucky. I was in a group called Sound and Fury that me and a guy started many years ago doing Shakespeare. And we went out to the Texas Fair, and he actually talked to the Flaming Idiots, which was a group on the circuit. And they said, you guys should go do fringe festivals. And we were like, what are French festivals? They're like, no, fringe festivals. So they started telling us about fringes, which, as you may know, is what made Reduce Shakespeare happen, because they went to the Edinburgh Fringe. Well, they said you should go up to Canada. So we took our show, Testicles and the Sack of Rome, up to Edmonton, Canada, which is North America's largest fringe festival. And we just did our outdoor Ren Fair show outdoors there. And it was a whole new market that hadn't seen what we were doing. And off of that, we ended up touring Australia and ended up being in Edinburgh Fringe and going all over doing shows. And so I'm so lucky that what we did at the fair translated so easily into a more legitimate theater world, whatever that is. And that was kind of the catalyst for me realizing what we did was powerful and could reach other audiences.
What did it feel like to go from a successful fair show and then having success with that show outside of fair?
I am so lucky that I basically got to be in a rock band. Basically, Sound and Fury was like touring with a successful band. And we started doing improv, and within the first year of doing Testicles, it just took off. And my God, I was lucky. I've only felt twice in my life that I was onto something, that a current that was so powerful it was beyond me. One was doing Sound and Fury and Testicles, and the other was recently when I started doing Dungeons and Shakespeare. Like, there is a momentum that I don't have to work so hard to find. It is flowing and wild and popular out of the gate. And I feel lucky to have struck kind of lightning again with this new show. It's the first time doing fair shows that I haven't had to go out and hawk and get people in really hard. I just walk out and there's a full audience, and I feel so damn lucky.
Again, that is something that we can thank the Pattersons for.
Yeah, and I was
They
thinking,
gave us 20,000 people a weekend to try something out on.
yeah, exactly. You try it again, and you're not failing. You're just trying and experimenting, and they've given us so much to give us that environment. And I was just thinking the other day how lucky we are that they gathered people, this kind of audience that knew that they were coming out for something very different. And then we got to have this laboratory of laughter and interaction out there.
When Phyllis et al. Was starting the fair, the historic preservation restoration community was very top down. And what the fair was the exact opposite, where they sort of gave the outline of the playground and then just said, go. We got to play within certain parameters. And I think that's one of the sort of legacies of the fair. Well, first of all, do you agree? And how did working in that environment, sort of a controlled freedom, influence you?
I've heard people over the years complaining about workshops sometimes, being like, oh, I got to get 3 more stamps. I got to go to a couple more classes. And then you hear other people that are just like, oh, I love this class. I loved the classes. God, I remember I did the Second City Conservatory. And I remember when I was at Second City, you would see people sometimes reading encyclopedias or books of trivia, just sitting out in the hall reading it, because you never knew where you were going to be able to throw things out. And the fair, giving people all these classes and knowledge of folklore and tradition and music and dance and all these, was just giving them a lot of seeds that they could go out and grow throughout the fair, and then just trust that you could do it. There was a lot of trust. It wasn't, like you said, it wasn't a lot of control. They weren't controlling us. They sent us out to play. And how dangerous and beautiful is that? And how great that environment, that little microcosm of a world out there, sorts people, and hopefully you find the guild that's perfect for you, or the stage that's right, or you know what I mean? And I think they did a lot of encouraging people to try different things. And, Cuthbert's was a great place that a lot of people started and then kind of spread out or stayed there. But during the week, you might have a computer IT job, but on the weekend, do you want to, or, you don't have to be an actor in the streets. You could be a part of a system that helps the Celts have a huge lunch or feast or fight, or you could learn about smithery. You know what I mean? Like, you find where you want to be. I used to think that the fair was a temporary thing, even though it had already been however many years old when I started 30 years ago. I used to think it'll go out of style, you know. And then every year there'd be something that would come out, whether it was Braveheart or Game of Thrones or Shakespeare in Love, whatever. Some movie would come out and kind of bring this fantasy world back into popular thing. And now I realize it's not going anywhere. It may change and evolve. In fact, it has, but people want this fantasy. It's not a passing fad.
Let me give you a counterfactual. In a world that the fair did not exist, how would your life have evolved?
Man, there would be so many of us closeted weird people. That's a harsh blow, fear not existing. I would have come out here and I probably would have done my best to make it in Hollywood, and I don't know what I probably would. I know, I would have ended up teaching, which is a fine thing to do, but I would have tried to act for a long time and then ended up teaching. What I did instead was I went to the UK and got my master's in theater, in advanced theater practice, a lot of it having to do with interactive, immersive, experiential theater, like we're doing at Fair. Because of Fair, I got that degree, and now I produce shows, and not just Dungeons and Shakespeare, but others, and it's all out of Ren Fair. So if it hadn't happened, I'd be a teacher somewhere. I probably have more money, but I don't think I'd be as happy, and I wouldn't be as free. Fair has given me a freedom to realize I can make my own way in the world, and I don't have to wait for anyone else to tell me what I can do.
Let's try another improv. It's Thanksgiving. You're
Okay.
with your family. You're trying not to talk about Trump. Say you have a niece. Let's call her Zoe. She's 14 years old. She puts down her fork full of mashed potatoes and says, "Next year, I'm doing the Renaissance Fair. Look at Uncle Shelby and all the fun he's had out there." Your sister puts down her fork of mashed potatoes and turns to you and says, "Yes, Shelby, tell me why Zoe, apple of my eye and light of my life, should do the Renaissance Fair." And you say,
What's my sister's name again?
uh, let's call her Mary.
Mary, we are so lucky this day. We have truly something to be thankful for, and it's not just Zoe and I's tofurkey. It is that Zoe today has entered the world of the weird. Zoe will no longer scroll Instagram 8 hours a day. She will stroll instead of scroll through the weirdness of the world. Welcome, Zoe, to the freaks and the degenerates and the beautiful people who make art and an environment and a community that flourishes in the bizarre. Look at Zoe's makeup. Zoe, I love that I don't know why you decided to come to Thanksgiving like David Bowie, but I commend you. And anyone who's 14 years old and has found the great Starman deserves to find the Ren Fair too. Now pass that tofurkey and let's all raise a glass of Martinelli's sparkling cider to Zoe. Welcome to the freaks.
Zoe
Mary.
is just beaming with joy. So good job. This is a weird improv and it usually doesn't work. Again, you're 18. The rent fair does not exist,
Oh.
but you're in the shower or something and you're imagining yourself at age 28 and you have become an overnight success at something. And you've gotten an Academy Award in this thing at age 28, being an overnight sensation. So give me what you at age 18 would have conceptualized yourself daydreaming about what you have won an Academy Award. Go.
If I hadn't been a professional dog walker, I probably never would have ran into Tom Hanks up in Beechwood Canyon on a hike one day. And because our dogs got along so well, we started meeting up, letting the dogs play, and he'd tell me a little bit. I wasn't, I didn't act like a starstruck fool. I didn't like beam over him. I just said I respected his work. I didn't pretend I didn't know who he was. He's Tom Hanks. But when he brought me in about 6 months later to read for Saving Private Ryan, I never could have guessed that Steven Spielberg himself would be there running the camera, the little video camera at the audition. Who would have thought that I would have been there because my dog, Zorro, got along so well with his dog, Petruchio, and started talking about Taming of the Shrew one day because of Petruchio, and he asked me if I acted. I said, well, yeah, a little bit. I don't want to
Yeah.
brag, but I do love Shakespeare. The next thing I know, I'm on location filming Band of Brothers. I was kind of it snowballed after Saving Private Ryan. I just feel so blessed and so lucky that I got that dog, and so lucky that I did Taming of the Shrew when I was in 8th grade and knew to talk about Petruchio.
Can I ask you, as the starstruck interviewer reporter from People magazine, one thing that critics really, when people, what I have noticed that you are a hit both among the critics and the popular audience. What do you think you bring to the table that makes you so popular with the critics and the general audience?
Well, thank you very much for the question. I hope that it's because I'm I'm conscious of the audience, but I'm mainly conscious of what I have to bring and what I want to offer, and not what the audience wants me to give. I think if you start pandering and trying to give the audience just what they want, or think of what they might want to see you do, things become disingenuous, and so you have to come from a place of your own truth, and that's what people will connect to more than you trying to figure out what they want you to do. Thank you, People Magazine. It's a pleasure to be here.
There is a rumor that you are both going to or have tryouts for the Lakers and the Dodgers at the same time. Do you have a preference on who you're going to play with next season?
Well, I think I'm gonna. It's a difficult question, really, but a good one because it's kind of a win-win. I think I've decided to go for the Dodgers, though, because I really like that moment where you acknowledge the audience and there's a moment of stillness, and I can just point over the far wall and let them know I'm in complete control of what's about to happen. With basketball, it's a lot of running around, it's beautiful energy, but I want that one clear moment where the audience and I are in total unison, and I am about to knock it out of the park, and everyone, including the pitcher, knows that.
To paraphrase, or uh, stop me if I'm putting words in your mouth,
Okay.
but they can, 60,000 people can see your spark. Is that what you're saying?
I think that's a good way to say it. And with that spark, I all I have is a spark. But think of all the things that are around that are tinder, that are wood that can burn, and we can together. I just have a spark, but together with the audience, we will create a torrential fire.
Well, I can very much see that you're going to have a career of success in this town,
Really
and
lucky.
that you will continue to light that fire of your talent through the years and decades that will follow. Thank you very much.
Thank you, People Magazine.
Uh, that was fun.
Yeah, but I definitely want to once again just give my thanks to the Ren Fair community, because I did move from the streets onto stage, but I've never felt like I was there just for the patrons. I felt like the village of the Ren Fair really supported what I was doing as well, and that meant a lot. I think people, I didn't come to fair with a fully formed show. I came and I tried a lot of different things. I've tried silent characters. I've done so many different shows, and the community has always supported me. So thankful.
I probably should have asked this sooner, and that's a very good closing statement. What have you learned not to do by failing at things at fair?
God, there's a beauty in doing a show or an interaction again and again and again. I've learned to not be so precious. If you are doing one show a month or working and working and working for to rehearse to do one or two shows, that's a very different feeling than doing 4 to 8 shows a day and getting up and just doing it again and again. There's a lightness of being. If you are just doing one show a month, how can you bring that same lightness to it? I want to say this. I had a teacher one time that said, "What is charisma? Why is it that you can have 10 people on stage and one of them you can't take your eyes off of? Not necessarily the prettiest person or the person that looks the most sure of themselves or whatever. What is it that makes them have charisma?" The teacher said, "Charisma is public self-acceptance. It is knowing exactly who you are, being good with that, whether that's all those adjectives we talked about earlier and knowing those are your things. It is knowing who you are and being good with that. If you are uncomfortable on stage with who you are, the audience is uncomfortable. If you mess up and you say, "I messed up," the audience is like, "Cool." If you mess up and you go, "Oh shit, oh shit, oh yeah, God, no, damn it," and you're mad at yourself, the audience is worried about you. And so when you're doing shows again and again and again and again, you learn to to be okay with not being perfect and maybe messing up, and that's okay, and calling it out. That public self-acceptance is is a beautiful thing when it comes to performance.
Well, and I'll make this my final question. What, looking back at your time at fair, what has given you the greatest joy?
I am old school fair in that I still think of Ren Fair as a family or a community that looks out after each other. And I could name all sorts of moments on stage where we had 1,500 people and I literally crowd surfed. But for me, the moments that I'm most thankful for with the fair are the ones where I realize that I have a group of people that has all enrolled in taking care of each other, has agreed to support each other, and I don't feel judged. I feel support constantly from that community out there. And if I do something new, or if it's the pandemic and I'm having to do videos online because I'm not being able to perform, hundreds of people that have seen me at fair come out, or that I know from fair come out and just show me love and support. And man, that's a beautiful thing, isn't it?
It is. You have an upcoming quasi fair show, Dungeons and Shakespeare, coming up. So take a moment and explain it to us.
Well, I hope people will come out and check out Dungeons and Shakespeare because it's different every time.
For those of
Yeah.
us who clearly don't know what Dungeons and Shakespeare
Yeah.
are,
So what happens
raising
is
my hand.
the audience comes to the show ready to play, and I have bags. They pull a Shakespeare character out of a bag. That is going to be the main protagonist of our adventure. We roll for their stats, just like in D&D. So they might get a tremendous strength and a really low dexterity. Who knows? But based off of those stats, what we know of the character, we take them on an adventure and we take them out of their story and into a Dungeons and Dragons style journey, pulling random people up from the audience to draw monsters from D&D. There are fights, there are dice rolls. The D20 is the real star of the show. So we may see our hero get everything they've ever wanted, or we may see them be viciously, brutally killed by monsters from D&D. And by our hero, they might be Lysander from A Midsummer Night's Dream, but it might be Lady Macbeth. And maybe we want them to be killed at the end, or maybe we want them to get every evil thing their heart desired. Every show is different. I'm not in charge. It is up to the audience choices and the roll of the dice. And I've never had so much fun.
I'm still trying to understand, and I'm sure this is but how do you have an audience watch people role playing in lifetime a Dungeons and Dragons adventure?
Every single person is chosen randomly from the audience. I don't know them. They aren't necessarily together. I just, as I said, have gotten really good at knowing the people who want to play and will be enjoyable for us all to be a part of this adventure. I bring somebody up, they randomly put their hand in a bag and pull out a monster from D&D, and then it's up to them how they want to play that character, but I have no idea how the story is going to go.
First of all, what is a typical audience size?
Well, when I was doing this on tour in Canada, I was doing it at fringe festivals. I'd have an audience of maybe 75 to 150 people. When I'm doing it at Ren Fair, I'm doing this 4 times a day, so it depends. Sometimes I'll have 100 people, sometimes I'll have 300 people. I use as many people as I can because a lot of people in costume want to be up on that stage. Sometimes I have up to 10, 12 people on stage with me.
So how does the action unfold?
Well, people in the audience stay in the audience, but people that come up onto the stage, as the DM, I am telling the story and I'm giving them choices. I'm asking them what they want to do. Obviously, it's broad strokes. Like a D&D adventure lasts up to a lifetime long.
Right.
So, I'm trying to do this whole thing in 30 or 45 minutes. So I give them choices. They make choices. They roll dice. Yeah, I one time we had Juliet as the main character, and a red slod came up onto stage. Juliet rolled 2 critical fails in a row. So I had to kill our main character, and our character for the rest of the show was a red slod. I had to follow the monster's story because Juliet died horribly.
I think this concept and how it's linked to its fair lineage. This is a great idea.
Well, thanks. I never
Yeah.
have to work to get volunteers. People are definitely up for playing. I just have to determine sometimes if they are too drunk, or and I have to make them leave their real sword on the hay bale. We all play together, and we're creating a story together. So it is my goal for it to be truly symbiotic in the creation of this wild story that will only unfold once. And what I love is I keep having people come back to every single show during the day. And sometimes I've had people come to every one during the entire run because they're like, well, I don't know what's going to happen in the next one.
Well, I'm sorry I'm in Oregon, so I'll miss this one.
Well, guess what? There's a chance that I might do the Oregon Ren Fair in June this year.
Well,
So if
uh,
so, I hope you can come out.
and I know you have a website. Just go to our good friends at Google and type in Dungeons and Shakespeare, and you will get all kinds of tour dates and photos and other fun stuff. And I think, well, that can conclude this interview, and I'll stop the
Well,
hit.
let's welcome Zoe out to the fair. It's going to be her first year this year. Please make her feel at home, okay?
I imagine she'll scamper on stage and dive headfirst into her adventure.
Shouldn't we all?
Yeah. Let's see. Stop recording. Oh, good. It's been recording. This has been my January 2024 interview with Shelby Bond. If you have questions or comments you would like for me to forward to Shelby, you can email me at djng@earthlink.net. You can contact Shelby directly through his website, uh, thebestmedicineproductions.com/Dungeons and Shakespeare, or just type in Dungeons and Shakespeare on Google and you can get there too. If you have questions or comments for me, you can also email me at djng@earthlink.net. Finally, if you or someone you know would like to be a guest on Fair Folk at Work, please feel free to email me at djng@earthlink.net. But that's it for this time. Thanks for listening. Bye bye.